Mayong hapon sa tanan. Welcome to the third Asuncion, Miteria, Austria Professorial Chair Lecture entitled Therapeutic Synergy, Investigating the Role of Client-Therapist Congruity and Complementarity on Alliance and Outcomes. In cooperation with UP PsychServe, today's lecture is part of a series of events for celebrating 50 years of Psikolohiyang Pilipino with the theme Psikolohiyang Mapagpalaya, Lipunang Mapagkalila. Today's speaker, Dr. John Robert Rilvera, is a licensed psychologist with training and expertise in applied behavior analysis, cognitive behavior therapy, and schema therapy. He specializes in the treatment of chronic mood and anxiety disorders, neurodevelopmental disorders, and personality disorders. He is working as an assistant professor at the UP Diliman Department of Psychology. He also serves as part of the supervising and clinical research team of the UPD Psychosocial Services or UP PsychServe. He is also affiliated with Child Fam Possibilities Psychosocial Services, working as a clinical supervisor for psychologists in training, and counselors. His research interests include development of therapeutic alliance, supervisory alliance, coping strategies, and digital mental health. Let's give a round of applause to Dr. John Robert Rilvera.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Paul, for that introduction. So, I'm actually thrilled that we have quite a number of participants today and sa ating FB Live as well. So, I do hope to facilitate a learning session and hopefully an appreciation of a very critical yet often underlooked and sometimes taken for granted ingredient in the psychotherapy process. And it's the relational dynamics between clients and therapists. So for my AMA Professorial Chair Lecture, my talk is about therapeutic synergy, investigating the role of client-therapist, congruity and complementarity on alliance and outcomes. But before we talk about these concepts, let me start by presenting a basic question in the field of psychotherapy. What makes psychotherapy therapeutic? And based on our research literature from the last decade up to now, we can identify 4 major factors that play a role in the mechanisms of change surrounding the psychotherapy process and its effectiveness. So first factors would be factors inherent to the clients themselves. In here, as clients enter the psychotherapy relationship with their therapists, they carry with them certain characteristics, certain tendencies, how they relate with people. Their characteristics could be their demographic background, cultural identities, their values, beliefs, even traits. They also have their own histories that they bring into the therapy relationship. Obviously, they have underlying or pre-existing conditions. That's why they seek for help. Their motivations, expectations, and actions. Actions meaning whether they comply with treatment, they attend sessions, they apply what has been learned in therapy. Similarly, we have therapist-related factors, factors inherent to the therapists themselves. So in the same way, as therapists guide or enter the psychotherapy journey of their clients, they also bring with them their own characteristics and interpersonal stances and approaches. They also have their own philosophical and theoretical orientations, their skills and competencies, and so on. So we can say from these factors that there are certain types of clients that greatly benefit from psychotherapy, and there are some who would have difficulty in that regard. Ganon din for therapists, we can argue that there are certain therapists would vary in terms of their skill level, in terms of their effectiveness as a therapist. So there would be more or less better or worse therapists than the others. Then we also have factors that are inherent to the treatment itself. Under this are evidence-based approaches. So when we say evidence-based approaches, this is a term used to refer to the kinds of treatment approaches, strategies, models that based on research evidences are proven to facilitate certain outcomes. These outcomes could be symptom reduction, alleviation of distress, enhancement of well-being, quality of life, etc. We also have empirically supported treatments. So ito naman yung term na ginagamit to refer to research evidences that also proves that certain treatment protocols or modalities are proven to be better, more effective than others in terms of treating certain conditions for certain populations. We also have treatment characteristics. These refer to the structure of treatment, how frequent the treatment sessions are, how long the treatment sessions would be, the interval, regularity between sessions, and lastly, cultural and contextual fit, referring to how relevant the treatment is to the client's needs, goals, and problems. And lastly would be the alliance-related factors. And we can define this as an interaction between client-related factors and therapist-related factors in the context of treatment. Under this would be the relational dynamics, rupture and potential repair of the alliance, and two concepts that I will be focusing later on, congruity and complementarity. So let's talk about alliance muna. So siguro I'll throw a question for the group, how to become allies in therapy. What are your indicators of alliance? How do you evaluate alliance in therapy? Paano natin masasabing nagkaroon, na-establish ang alliance with our clients? So, can you share your thoughts about this? What are your responses to these questions? Anyone, feel free to raise your hand or kung sa ating FB Live as well to comment. How can we say that there is alliance in therapy? Anything on top of your head? Let's chat.
Hi. So yung naisip ko siguro is when the client feels open and willing to share any disagreements regarding the therapy process or regarding what is being talked about in the session.
Okay, so degree of openness from the client, willingness to share, disclose positive experiences as well as uncomfortable negative experiences, perhaps. Anyone else?
Aaron from the chat.
From the chat, ano ang sabi? From the comment section.
So sabi ni Cheryl, when the client trusts you.
When the client trusts you, so there is the word trust. Do you agree? Any other indicators of alliance? Or do you evaluate alliance in your therapy relationships? Yes, Jackie.
Siguro in a broader sense, for me it means working towards the same goal. And in the process kasi, napapansin ko, like in class formulations and in therapy, there are client-defined goals and there are like therapist-defined goals. And siguro alliance could also mean like a synthesis of both of those goals and like meeting in the middle. So yun po for me.
Thanks, Jackie. So meeting, alignment of goals, which is true, that really exists. Clients have their own goals for therapy, and therapists as well have their own goals for their clients. It's now a question of whether to what extent are these goals aligned? And perhaps if there is an alignment in the goals, pwede natin masabi they're allies in the therapy process. So let me just share with you a 5 relationship model by Petruska Clarkson. Clarkson stated that in the psychotherapy process, 5 forms of relationships emerge or are created inevitably. This is a naturally occurring process in psychotherapy na may form na 5 klase ng relationships. First one is the therapeutic alliance. And this has been consistently defined as agreement on goals, engagement and collaboration on tasks, how to reach those goals, and a development of a healthy bond. Lagi yan, no? That 3-component model of alliance. And I like to call it or describe it as masabing may alliance if the healthy part of the client interacts with the healthy part of the therapist. And it makes sense. If both of you are quote-unquote healthy psychologically, possibly, more likely may agreement, engagement, collaboration, and a healthy bond. Another relationship that Clarkson identified is the transference and counter-transference relationship. And I assume most, if not all of you, are familiar with the terms. Diba? This is about projection of some unconscious material. It could be possibly some underlying issues or a reminder of a significant other is projected onto the relationship. And it could be that on the part of the therapist, same way, may underlying issues din siya na unconsciously influencing the way they relate to the client, or possibly misinterpreting the reactions of the client due to their personal issues as well. So it's a manifestation of unconscious processes. And I call it this way, vulnerable part of the client interacts with the vulnerable part of the therapist. So in this kind of relationship, pareho kayong vulnerable and you will be confronted with those issues when they arise. Especially if these issues remain unresolved or unprocessed. The third type of relationship is a reparative or developmentally needed relationship. In this form of relationship, the therapist provides the emotional needs that were deprived from the client. So this involves identification of needs of the client and an opportunity for the therapist, to a certain extent, to meet or provide those needs for them. So we can say that the healthy part of the therapist interacts with the vulnerable part of the client. The fourth one is the authentic or real relationship. It's defined as the I-thou relationship, meeting of 2 human beings. We can say that the person of the client interacts with the person of the therapist. So dito, tao sa tao na ugnayan. You're no longer treating the other as just clients and therapists. Potentially, tinatrato natin isa't isa as fellow human beings. And the last one is a transpersonal relationship. Connection to deeper levels of being and becoming. So both clients and therapists are transformed in the process. So you can see here that even if these are qualitatively distinct forms of relationships, Clarkson also argued that therapeutic alliance, these relationships are interdependent. So even if we just focus on alliance, it's not just about its components, the goals, tasks, and bond. It's also about the surrounding relationships as well that coexist with it, that may or may not strengthen that alliance. Diba? Possible na mas strengthen palalo yung alliance if you're able to navigate transference and counter-transference processes, if you're able to facilitate a corrective emotional experience, if there is a treatment of each other as fellow human beings, and if there's a connection to a larger world or larger universe, right? So in research, now focusing on alliance, consistently naman, no, mayroong mga research based to dun sa on how evidence-based treatments are provided. Psychotherapy facilitates certain outcomes. And also, in the same way, therapeutic alliance based on research also can be associated with good outcomes. There are also research focusing on alliance as a potential moderator, meaning whether the quality of alliance strengthens or weakens the effect of psychotherapy on outcomes. There are also other research looking at alliance as a mediator, meaning alliance is necessary to be established first for psychotherapy to be effective. So across those examples of research on alliance, whether it's treated as a main predictor, as a moderator, or mediator, consistent naman that there's a positive influence on outcomes. Nagva-vary lang, obviously, in magnitude of effects, but the direction of effect is consistent. It's also interesting to look at alliance from a longitudinal standpoint. What happens with outcomes over time, depending on the level of alliance. So let me just show you some 4 primary patterns of alliance. So we have positive linear, meaning across sessions, tumataas yung level of alliance. Meron din tinatawag na high, low, high alliance pattern. There is a decline at the middle portion of the psychotherapy journey and then gradually rising at the latter part. Stable high pattern, meaning there's some steadiness or consistency in high levels of alliance over the sessions, across the sessions. And there's an erratic, so irregular pattern. So I guess my question is, which alliance pattern do you think is associated with best outcomes? If you'd like, or siguro another question, but more subjective question siguro, which do you prefer na maging itsura sana ng alliance nyo with your clients? Positive linear, high, low, high, stable high, erratic. Obviously, hindi ko na pinakita yung negative linear because it's associated with negative outcomes. Anyone? Sino may gusto or preferred ang positive linear? Tumataas across sessions. Okay, we have some. How about high, low, high? Magdidip, magde-decline, mataas ng una, tapos biglang magde-decline, and then tataas ulit. How about stable high? Consistent, somewhat consistent, we can say, na mataas across sessions. And may gusto ba ng may erratic, irregular alliance level, patterns? So actually, there's another more interesting question here. So, siguro just to answer this, kasi nasagot na to in research, no? The alliance pattern associated with good outcomes are actually the 3. Positive linear, high, low, high, and stable high. Nagva-vary lang ng degree of effectiveness. Pero, it's a positive association. Another interesting result in the research literature is that high alliance levels at initial and terminal, latter part of therapy are stronger predictors of outcomes compared to the alliance levels at the middle part of your psychotherapy. So nagmamatter ang first impressions, first meeting, and how you terminate, how you end that relationship. Okay? Another more interesting question siguro na magandang itanong is, what clinically meaningful insights can be derived from tracking therapeutic alliance patterns over time? You can see here, maganda naman talaga ang positive linear. I think we want that. Compared to a downward negative direction. But meron siyang limitations in the sense na baka more likely applicable lang to saan? Or hindi mo to i-expect sa anong klaseng cases. You might expect this more for less severe, less complex cases and conditions. Pero hindi mo siya may expect sa more chronic, more complex, more severe types of cases, right? I mean, it makes sense. The high-low-high pattern, ano kaya sa tingin yung indication ng dip, decline at this point, and or nagsimula sa taas and then bumaba and then tumaas? What could be an insight from that?
So I think merong skepticism on the part of the client. Wherein like, as the client... So, isip ko, at the start, siguro may buy-in si client, and as time passes in the middle, may skepticism siya. Sasabihin niya, is this working? I don't think this is how this works. Ganyan. But come the tail end, nakita nila, something's working. And then they feel like, okay, there's a lot of more stronger alliance taking place. And therefore, I guess, positive outcomes.
Possibly, no? May skepticism, may doubts sa middle part nung, is this still working? Is this working? Is this effective for me? Pero maganda rin idagdag, no? Kasi yung sagot mo is more about the feelings, the thoughts, the experience of the client. Ano rin kayo nararanasan ng therapist sa ganyang pattern? Bakit din nag-decline? So, di ba, with kanina, the definition of alliance also, it means interaction between the two. So there must be something that the therapist is doing as well that makes the client think that way or react that way. Pero fortunately, tumaas. So hindi lang yon client-initiated na pagtaas. May ginawa rin yung therapist para tumaas yung alliance rating. So that is actually a manifestation of a rupture and repair of alliance, which, based on research then, is better than the positive linear. In terms of effects, pareho naman sila associated with good outcomes, pero better outcomes are associated with may naging tension and then opportunities, efforts to resolve. Okay? The next one is stable high. So gusto rin natin to actually. Ayaw na ba to? Pero ano ding insight ang pwede nating makuha kapag steady na matataas across sessions? Anyone? What do you think? Yes, Jackie.
Ito, when I encounter clients na ganito yung presentation, I would sometimes get concerned na, is there a possibility that they're just presenting in a way that pleases me, or like, as the therapist, parang they present what I want to see in a client. So, parang, ayun yung concern ko, especially with clients na mataas ang people-pleasing tendencies.
Yeah, no? Yun din yung lumalabas sa research about stable high patterns. Kung kanina, nabanggit ni Raf na nagda-doubt yung client, kaya bumaba, dito, nagda-doubt yung therapist, bakit ang taas palagi. So, in a stable high pattern, although on one hand, it's good, you can celebrate that. On the other, baka magandang may degree of doubt or suspicion, bakit siya ganun kataas? Given the client's case, condition, context, and so on. Ito ba talaga yung expected sa ganitong case? So yeah, that's just a caution or caveat on the stable high pattern. Then lastly, for erratic, walang may gusto nito kanina. Pero what insight can we derive from? Kasi possible itong may mangyaring ganito sa ating practice. Ngayon, pag titingnan nyo, if you encounter such ratings, what does that mean for you? Yes.
It makes me think kung naintindihan ko ba talaga si client. If I'm getting, the formulation right, and if the client feels understood. Parang baka mamaya, instead of yung stable high lang siya, nakikita mo talaga na minsan okay siya, minsan hindi, and then I have to check, baka nag-work ba yung ginagamit ko na models or techniques.
So yung idea na minsan okay siya, minsan hindi, or minsan okay kami, minsan hindi, might also ask those questions, is it working? Yes, great.
Minsan din kapag halimbawa yung mas severe yung presentation ng client, tapos mas relational yung problems ni client. So sa umpisa parang magiging accommodating si therapist to make sure na mamimit yung emotional needs ni client kaso masasobrahan si client doon. So hindi na set yung appropriate boundary. So darating, mabibuild up yung resentment ni therapist hanggang sa parang ayaw ko nang sagutin yung mga messages ng client ko. Sorry. Ayun, so tapos parang we'll try to repair that rupture pero parang hanggang pa rin, nahihirapan pa rin to establish that kind of dynamic na mas madaling, or parang magiging high pa din yung, yung perception of relational strength between therapist and client.
Yeah, di ba? That pattern actually reflects your client's case. Kung erratic yung, lalo na alliance is a relational variable, so you might want to think about, kamusta ba yung relationships nitong client na to, given his or her history or condition? Do I expect an erratic or irregular alliance rating then? Okay, so helpful pa din or meaningful pa din even if this is, so usually nga common ito sa personality disorders. Conditions that would have difficulty forming, pursuing, maintaining, terminating relationships. Diba? Kanina maraming mga responses on ito yung tingin ng client, ito yung tingin ng therapist. So before kasi, the alliance research, way back, only focuses on individual levels of ratings of alliance. So may client-rated alliance and therapist-rated alliance. And they look at how these individually, separately, influence outcomes. And it turns out that both individual ratings of alliance significantly influence outcomes, positive outcomes. However, consistent pa rin, client-rated alliance are the stronger, have stronger associations with outcomes. But still, both are significant. So, now it becomes interesting, paano kaya kung we look at how close or far apart the ratings are together, and is it relevant? Is it associated with outcome? So dito pasok yung concept ng alliance congruence. And this is my first research question sa aking dissertation. Does it matter ba if very close ang ratings or very congruent, the more congruent or the more discrepant the ratings are, would it matter when looking at associated outcomes? So in fact, it does. No? And when I try to plug in all these variables, merong paring unique effect yung alliance congruence over and beyond the effects already of the individual ratings. Meaning, may added explanatory power yung alliance congruence beyond what the individual ratings can already explain in terms of outcomes. And it is, so I found out in my research that congruence at average to high levels of alliance are associated with positive outcomes. So okay lang kahit hindi mataas yung alliance level, pero you are kahit on average levels of alliance, as long as congruent yung ratings, it is associated with good outcomes. Okay? It's also interesting to look at it from a longitudinal standpoint again. Ibig sabihin, over time, kapag how does it relate to outcomes? The congruence over time is actually referred to as convergence. So kapag pa nagko-converge over time, is it associated with outcomes? So yeah, the more convergent the ratings are across sessions, they are associated with positive outcomes, and the more incongruent the sessions are, the alliance ratings are, they are associated with negative outcomes. Okay. Sorry. Hello. So now, we established that alliance congruence matters. So napatanong din ako, I wondered if, are there other areas of congruences that are relevant in the psychotherapy process? So I thought of, ano pa kayong pwedeng areas of life or functioning or characteristics of clients and therapists that matter when they are congruent? So here we introduce the concept of congruity. Now in this case, not in terms of alliance ratings, but in terms of the characteristics that they possess, in terms of traits, values, culture, siguro demographic, background, beliefs, and also interpersonal factors, their communication styles, attachment styles, emotional expression styles. So here are examples of congruity at the level of interpersonal and interpersonal factors. For example, a Muslim LGBT client and a Muslim LGBT therapist share language, cultural norms, and experiences of marginalization. Another example, both client and therapist value spirituality, family orientation, and social justice. A therapist with lived experience of chronic illness, currently working with a client who is currently adjusting to a disability. A therapist and client who both prefer direct, emotionally expressive communication. And a client with high function anxiety and a high need for structure, working with a CBT-trained therapist with a goal-oriented, structured approach. So kung titingnan nyo yung ganitong shared, similar congruences in these aspects, what do you think? How do these shape, influence, alliance, and outcomes? Sa tingin nyo ba kapag mas similar ka with your client in terms of some or a lot of variables, would that be helpful? Any thoughts on that? Or have you encountered clients na you have a lot of similarities with? And how does that look like in your alliance? Yes. Shari.
Hello. I think it's both helpful and challenging to have these similarities with them. It's helpful in the sense na the client can also feel like you understand what it is that they're going through. Like, you don't just understand on a surface level, but because you have shared lived experience, na nag-gets mo. Parang alam mo talaga kung ano yung pinagdadaanan niya in that sense. But it's also challenging because it's likely that some challenges that the client is facing, some wounds that they have, may also rub against your own wounds, which may bring up certain feelings during the therapy session. So, kailangan mo rin to be very mindful of your own, kung encounter transference mo rin during the session and your own responses how you react to their situations also. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Shari. So on one hand, pwedeng beneficial for, facilitating deeper understanding, shared, because of shared resonance. You're resonating with your client's resonating with you. Pero on the other, being very careful as well not to rely on that too much, and be aware as well of possible reactions you might have towards your client because of such similarities, or vice versa. Any other thoughts? Yes. Ciao.
Siguro in addition to what Shari shared, naisip ko lang kung sobrang similar kayo ni client ng characteristics and whatnot, even yung experiences, baka maka-promote siya, maka-reinforce siya ng parang, alam ko na to. So parang it will, parang, might make it seem like you already know what the client is going through. So it may alienate the client from their own experience. So it might break or damage yung alliance and yung congruity, I guess.
Yes, di ba? You might, may danger na baka magkaroon ng assumption na you already know what their client is going through, which might lead to biased approaches or imposing certain approach. Yes, Rachel.
Sa akin naman, parang to add din sa challenges ng pag masyadong mataas yung congruity, lalo na kapag parehas kayo ng defense, ng self-protections with client. So for example, kung yung client intellectualizer, ikaw ganun din. So parang may tendency na hindi mo mapapalalim yung additional, ano pa yung meron dun sa experience ni client. Kasi nandun lang kayo sa level nun, what is easy for both of you. So lagi lang kayong magsa-psychoeducation, lagi lang kayong mag-rationalize, pero hindi ma-address yung what needs to be addressed pa beyond the shallow self-protections mo at ng client.
So in addition to that, kasi sabi niya na parang pareho kayo mag-intellectualize, I guess it might also make it harder to notice that you're doing that. Kasi you're of the same language, of the same defense, self-protection, so on.
Yeah, so tama. You're actually so sharing too much. So there is a caution that we need to take into account or to consider potential damage or negative implications of too much congruities in a lot of areas, because you might assume, you might, because of too much sharedness, you might not get out of that shared space, which may hinder growth. So there is a benefit, katulad na banggit kanina ni Shari, it fosters safety and trust because you share something in common. And kung marami din yun, increases client comfort, and potentially they will be more willing to disclose if you understand their language, their culture, where they are coming from. It promotes mutual understanding and deeper empathy. And in research, it is associated with early, strong alliance formation. So it matters at the early points of alliance. Meaning it's easier to establish alliance for clients you share something with. Caution lang on over-identifying with your clients because of too much similarities, which can blur boundaries or bias interventions. Yun nga, no? Ito yung ginawa ko, try mo rin ito. You might be projecting your own path. So when I say projecting your own path, diba? Whatever decisions, choices you've made, because of those circumstances, you might unconsciously impose them on your clients. Because these are the only things you know how to approach. It can create an echo chamber. Kasi nga, wala na iba. Yeah, parang pareho kayong sharing the same thing. It might suggest less challenge and less opportunities for growth or to expand that space, and risk of collusion. So ito yung nabanggit kanina ni Gratian. So there are similarities in certain traits, styles, na baka hindi beneficial. For example, neuroticism. Obviously, a highly neurotic client working with a highly neurotic therapist, imagine how would that look like? Pareho kayong emotionally reactive and unstable. Or in certain interpersonal styles, pareho kayong dominant, parehong avoidant. And this is actually what I found out in my second research question. While similarities in certain traits, values, beliefs, orientations are associated with, positively associated with outcomes, what I found out is clients and therapists do not have to share or do not have to be similar in all traits, in all values, in all interpersonal styles. May mga domains of traits, values, orientations na hindi significantly associated with outcome. So I wondered if mayroong degrees of similarities na okay at meron ding hindi. I wonder if differences are associated with outcomes. When I read about client-therapist differences, lumalabas yung term na complementarity. Okay? Still within the same dimensions at the intrapersonal level or interpersonal levels. But this time, we're not looking at alignments or agreements or similarities. We're looking at differences, and they describe this as productive functional differences that are mutually enhancing, or that make them compatible in the therapy relationship. So examples, emotionally avoidant, intellectualizing, so sakto sa example ni Gratian, with an emotionally attuned, affect-focused therapist. Controlling, overly self-reliant client, and a calm, boundary-asserting, collaborative therapist. A client who is action-oriented, uncomfortable with introspection, working with an insight-focused, reflective therapist. Emotionally dysregulated client, responding well with an emotionally stable therapist. A young adult client struggling with identity crisis, interacting with an older therapist with a stable identity. So sa tingin nyo, looking at these examples, okay ba yung ganitong interaction or dynamics? Or do you also see potentially negative implications? Or what are your thoughts on complementarity between clients and their therapists?
Although nabanggit ko kanina yung positive, yung benefits of difference, parang kailangan napansin ko din from my own client experience, may openness dapat both parties to accept those differences. Kasi parang if yung client ay, halimbawa, kasi parang may experience ako with intellectualizing client, tapos sinusubukan ko siya mas maging open emotionally, hindi siya nagre-respond well doon sa ganong intervention. So, parang minsan kailangan mong sabayan kung ano yung comfortable sila, enough to get them into parang buy-in doon sa treatment. Kasi otherwise, parang may difference kayo in how to get to the goal, that the therapy goal na napag-agrihan, and the treatment will not work then. So kailangan, I think, may certain level of openness for both client and therapist for it to work.
Yeah, so hindi rin madali to actually establish complementary roles in the therapy relationship. Sabi nga ni Gracia, baka may resistance, no, to acknowledge a different perspective, different approach, different styles of relating and interacting. So maganda yung sabi ni Gracia na kailangan mo munang sabayan bago ka mag exert ng change, no? Or try to exert some change. Yes, Joy.
Isang nakita ko, and siguro nakita ko rin siya sa client work ko is, yung nga, pag mas congruent, di ba, mas more shared experiences, so mas parang more positive interaction. So kapag complementarity, parang mas may possibility na magkaroon ng hindi pagkakasundo ng rupture, and then yung pag-repair, yung attempt ng therapist to repair, and openness ng client to accept the repair, nagkakaroon siya ng positive outcomes eventually sa therapy.
So nakikita natin na parehong pwedeng maging beneficial, even if, so sa congruity kanina, we see may benefits, lalo na sa in trying to form an alliance, pero being careful and mindful of potential over-identification and counter-transference reactions. And sa complementarity naman, mahirap sa umpisa, pero it's an opportunity for. So there is a tension. There will be tension because of, lalo na if it has become a habit or internalized part of the client system, yung ganitong tendencies, tapos bigla kang iba yung style mo, magkakaroon ng clash or tension. But it's, well, ang burden na kanina. It's a challenge for the therapist to how to navigate that tension, potential resolve, or yun nga, it's more becoming more strategic how to work with those apparent differences which are sources of those tensions. Okay. So yeah, but it facilitates social learning and emotional co-regulation because your client might learn from you because you're different from them. Supports corrective emotional and relational experiences, reduces resistance and interpersonal tension, perhaps mas compatible yung interpersonal styles, and associated with deeper insight. So ito yung nasa research, yung fourth point. It's associated with deeper insight and growth over time. So nagmamatter siya sa middle part to the latter part of your psychotherapy relationship. Caution, points for caution, unbalanced complementarity without sensitivity can lead to alliance rupture unless repaired. Lalo na if you force it agad-agad. No? Kaya maganda yung kaninang strategy na sabayan mo muna, pero don't stay there for long. No? Too many dissimilarities, obviously, may pose difficulties in attunement and alliance formation. And complementarity must be intentional, flexible, and attuned to the client's needs. And therapists may unconsciously gravitate toward familiar or complementary roles that reflect their own schemas. Ang example dito na hindi nakakatulong yung complementaries kasi comfortable ka with certain complementary arrangements, meaning kasi may underlying ano ka din, issues, for example. For example, your clients begging for answers, solutions, what do I do, what should I do, and the therapists keep on providing answers for them. How would that look like over time? No? Or is that helpful in the long term? Or my sense of learned helplessness, for example, for the client, and then it hits something on the therapist wants to rescue them, wants to solve their problems for them, instead of trying to teach them how to navigate their problems on their own. Okay. So we have established a fair share of benefits and potential limitations and danger for congruity and complementarity. So what is the synergy? So I'll just give some examples on both congruities and complementarities na if you look at it, baka doon natin makita yung fitness. So for example, congruity in values plus complementarity in affect regulation. So client who is emotionally reactive, values openness, expresses emotions openly, and a therapist who is emotionally stable, also values openness, but models emotional containment. So how does it look like? Congruity in valuing emotional honesty creates trust and deepens alliance. And complementarity in emotion regulation provides a stabilizing influence for the client's reactivity. So as an outcome, client feels seen and accepted while gradually learning to self-regulate. Another example, congruity in communication style plus complementarity in interpersonal dominance. Client who is highly verbal, submissive, prefers intellectualized processing. Therapist who is also verbally skilled but adopts a more directive stance and encourages exploration of emotions alongside intellectual insight. So there's a shared communication style, facilitating a productive dialogue, and the therapist's interpersonal style complements the client's submissiveness, helping structure sessions and offer containment. And client engages cognitively and as well as emotionally and benefits from the therapist's structure without feeling controlled. Congruity in cultural background plus complementarity in relational behavior. For example, client belonging to the same culture as the therapist, avoidant in conflict, they seek harmony and communion. And a therapist who shares cultural identity with the client encourages assertiveness and autonomy, but still within a culture-sensitive framework. So the client feels culturally understood, but still challenged to grow. Congruity in spiritual, existential orientation plus complementarity in emotional expression. So a client who is spiritually inclined but emotionally guarded. And a therapist may fit well with a therapist who shares spiritual orientation but is more emotionally expressive and models vulnerability. So you can see yung additive effects if you consider both. Not just additive but balancing effects actually. But producing healthier outcomes. Congruity in learning style plus complementarity in direction. So a client who is a visual learner who prefers structure and concrete plans, and a therapist who uses diagrams, visuals, worksheets, but also helps the client tolerate ambiguity and uncertainty over time. So client feels understood and motivated, yet develops resilience in handling life's unpredictable aspects. Congruity in social justice orientation and complementarity in emotional containment. So a client who is a passionate activist, has intense emotions about social issues, and a therapist who shares the same social justice values, but provides a calm, grounding presence. So the client experiences social validation and learns healthier ways to express valid emotions. So what are, so yeah, anong saysay nitong looking at congruity and complementarity? So what are the implications for clinical practice? Well, it has an implication on possible kaya, no? If we try pre-treatment client-therapist matching in certain variables. Bibihira siyang practice in clinics, in organizations, to deliberately assess both therapists and clients. Kasi ina-assess lang natin usually clients pre-treatment. Right? Pero baka naman, if potentially may value also in assessing variables for the therapists and having a basis for matching early on. So there may be incorporating interpersonal assessments, value assessment, personality assessment. So for example, so hindi nyo nakita, no? Kunyari yung interpersonal sort complex. So sinasabi, no, better ang congruity in the horizontal axis. So ito yung warmth, friendliness, and hostility and coldness on the other. So better if you are both similar on this aspect, and better if you're complementary on the vertical axis, that's dominance and submissiveness. For the values orientations, this is also a circumplex. So the more adjacent, the closer the values are in this figure, the more compatible, the more they belong to the same group, right? And then certain traits. So in my research, ang lumabas na traits that are relevant if the clients and therapists who share or who are similar, highly similar in openness, agreeableness, and extroversion traits. Okay, and then there's an implication for in-treatment dyadic dance. So now that you have established pre-treatment matching, ano na pwede nyo gawin throughout, no? Moving forward, right? So therapists can foster growth by balancing clients' tendencies. Being calm and structured with an anxious, disorganized client, or being directive with a passive client. Being attuned to the client's way of relating and being able to, quote-unquote, shift gears. This is where complementarity comes in. So wala tayong magagawa with congruity. May ma-establish kayong similarities, may ma-establish kayong dissimilarities early on. Pero on our part as therapists, we may be able to do something about complementarity. And that's a burden on us, a challenge on us to be that flexible, to shift gears, to shift styles, depending on our clients' interpersonal styles. Right? Knowing when to validate and challenge, when to allow expression and model containment, and when to hold back and redirect. So client-therapist fit is not a static state, but a dynamic process. Recognition and resolution of alliance ruptures, so understanding mismatches in interpersonal styles and too many similarities may explain potential ruptures in alliance. So we may need to adjust our approach to better align or deliberately complement the client's needs depending on context. And to reflect on our own emotional responses and potential biases when working with our clients, especially when similarities exist. In clinical training and supervision, hindi rin kasi siya tinuturo, no? Deliberately, explicitly. What we focus more on are therapy models, orientations, and strategies and stances, but the dynamics or how we relate to our clients regardless of your orientation is not explicitly taught. So, baka magandang may how we can develop awareness on our own styles, biases, preferred styles, and orientations, and integrating alliance-focused interventions in supervision and clinical training. Then in treatment planning and case conceptualization, so including client-therapist fit as a variable in treatment. So hindi rin natin ito sinasabi, di ba? Hindi nilalagay, di ba? Client-therapist fit sa case formulation. We always focus on core problem and sub-goals and how to address those problems. What strategies, methods to. So we're more focused on concrete methods and concrete outcomes, but we are overlooking processes in between. So developing a strong and congruent alliance with continuous reassessment via feedback-informed treatment. So explicitly talking about it with your clients. How's our alliance? How is therapy with me so far for you? Leveraging client therapist congruities to build safety and validation, and complementarities to introduce adaptive challenges, and looking at client therapist dynamics as a reflection of their relational problems, and adjusting intervention styles. So that's it. I end my discussion with two quotes I found. So first, by Dr. Charles Gelso. Therapeutic synergy arises when the client feels both met where they are and gently invited somewhere new. And by John Norcross and Michael Lambert, when therapists can attune to both similarities and functional differences in the therapeutic dyad, the relationship becomes a space for both comfort and transformation. So with that, thank you so much for listening and participating.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rilvera. The floor is now open for questions, further questions. So kindly just raise your hand and we will go to you.
Thanks, Bobby, for the presentation. It's also fascinating to me because I'm not from this world. So I'm coming from someone. So pinakikinggan kita, tapos nagkagaya ko sa perspektiba ng isang tao na naghahanap ng therapist, di ba? So like, ako, I've always been curious how it would be like for me. But I want to be a better person. Hindi ko alam. Gusto ko talaga maging better person. And I think maybe a therapist can help me. But my understanding is, kami as clients, we really can't be very choosy, right? Kasi the reality is, there aren't many of you, right? So in fact, when somebody asks me for a referral, hindi ko naman necessarily sabihin, okay, let's talk about congruity, let's talk about all these things. Ang basic questions ko lang ay willing to pay? And are you willing to see the person in face-to-face or online? And then, tas ako, magtatanong din ako kung ano yung hinahanap ko. Sabi ko, gusto ko lang yung magaling. Diba? But I do understand, medyo mahaba ng preface ito kasi binibuild ko yung tanong ko in my mind while I'm doing this. I get what you're saying because from a social psychologist perspective, yung ganitong similarity, to me, it makes sense kasi it minimizes threat. Diba? So I see you were similar, so I guess I'd be more relaxed, I'd be more open. So I do understand. But also I'm coming from, the people that I want to be my therapist cannot be either because they're fully booked or they're my friends. So I guess ang question ko ay, so for someone like me, or maybe for people listening on Facebook na naghanap kami ng therapist, knowing what you know now, knowing what you've learned, ano palagay mo yung pwede naming hanapin, na basic or minimum, na makakatulong sa amin to reach this kind of alliance? Does that make sense? Kumbaga parang, in an ideal world, I would imagine parang Tinder to di ba? Ay, bakla rin siya, or ay, ano siya, funny, or gusto rin niya si Mariah, swipe. Diba? Pero hindi naman talaga yun magagawa kasi kung sino lang yung walang pila. Doon lang kami mapupunta. So ang nakukuha ko actually, just sinasabi mo, ay we will both have to work to get to that point, no? And I guess yung question ko ay, ano yung, kung ako naghahanap ako, ano yung basic na masasabi mo sa akin na, ito siguro yung hanapin mo sa first moment na mag-usap. Kasi feeling ko dun mo na yung matitest, diba? So parang ano yung pwede naming, ano yung dance? Ano yung step ko dun sa dance para makuha ko yung alliance na yun? Gets my question. Sobrang na-curious na ako and I'm so fascinated. So thank you so much for the presentation.
Thanks, Sir Tondo. Very complex din yung question. Ang hirap sagutin directly. ay walang definite answer. So yung question is, anong hahanapin ko sa aking therapist when I want to seek for therapy? Tama ba, sir? So parang pre-treatment or ano yung kapag nasa first session na ako, ano yung hahanap? Ano yung to stay in the therapy?
Kung tama yung intindi ko, parang mas realistic yung in-treatment.
In treatment?
Kasi
Yes.
yung pre-treatment,
Wala tayong-
kung tama rin understanding ko, hindi naman ako pwede makapili. Kasi, like kung pipila ako sa psych serve, hindi ko naman, sino pwede? hindi naman, sino magaling? Hindi naman ganun, di ba? Parang, sir, ito parang dito muna tayo. So, I'm guessing, pag nandun na ako, kausap ko na siya, how do I what do I look for? And maybe what do I also do so that we, kahit na hindi siguro kami congruous on many levels, we can still build the alliance.
Siguro dun muna sa congruity, iniisip ko lang, kahit pre-treatment, pwede naman. Basta wag ka lang maghanap ng lahat. So, pwede ko bigyan ng list of what you prefer. And then we can find similarities in some, or kahit at least one. Baka that's a starting point to, na mas ma-ease into the therapy better than, or faster than, kung walang similarities at all. So kung in treatment na, ang isa kong naiisip is yung, obviously mas magmamatter na yung complementary behaviors. So as a client, the question is ano yung hahanapin ko or indicator ko to see, to assess if it's a match, if it's a fit to a certain extent, not 100%, but to a certain extent para magstay ako. Baka, for me, kasi if na-balance yung pareho, or hindi na-balance, pero nagagawa pareho to, yun nga, yung dyadic dance, ibig sabihin, may comfort, may tension. Kasi kung comfort lang, it would be boring, perhaps. At kung tension lang din, ayaw mo nang bumalik. So baka kung yung dalawang yun, hindi ko lang alam kung anong, maraming pwedeng itsura ng comfort. It could be just, may narinig ka lang, no? Words of encouragement, diba? They understand you, they listened where no one else are. Tapos, tension din, china-challenge ka niya. Kasi, maganda may opportunities for growth. Kaya ka nga nagpunta ng therapy. Sabi mo, you want to be better. So, to be better, willing ka to accommodate comfort and conflict or tension to change. Parang ganun. I don't know, am I making sense? Ang hirap na sa part ng therapist. Right? Kasi, sir, pwedeng nagba-vary sa anong session yun mangyayari. Pwede kasi initial sessions, first, second, third, it varies, no? I'm not saying every session may tension or every session is comfortable. Pero it depends na sa skill level, sa comfort level din ng therapist, sa readiness niyong dalawa. Kung pang ilang session yun mangyayari. So I can't say na mahanap mo siya agad sa initial session. So parang, yeah, similar to, you're getting, as much as your therapist is getting to know you, you're also getting to know how your therapist reacts, responds, attends to your needs. And if you're willing to give it a chance, babalik ka. That's also yung compliment din nun eh. Kung babalik ka, mas may marami pang opportunities to do that. So, yeah.
Other questions?
Hello. So actually, hindi siya question. Parang napaisip din kasi ako sa tanong ni Sir Ton. Very something na mapapaisip ka talaga if you work with clients, di ba? So, ano ka. Ang naisip ko kasi, kung ako yung therapist, tapos tinanong ako ng client o something like that, or sa start, or something na parang ang kaya kong mabigay sa client at the onset would be parang to offer ng, yung sinabi kanina ng openness, readiness, parang setting of expectations that therapy is a process, first and foremost, na yun nga, na start pa lang ng session na, syempre ang goal mo naman is to build rapport, meron kayong goals na i-share, and then there will be, it's a process, it can go, may mga ups and downs, para setting expectation at the onset, para just in case may mga moments of hindi kami naging okay or may tension nga kami na-experience, na-plant mo yung seed doon sa client na nasabi to sa akin that something like this would happen. And parang yung alliance pa rin is nandun na hindi ko kailangan hiwalayan si therapist just because something like this happened. Kasi I think, di ba parang in relationships naman in general, not just therapist-client relationships, parang when you're trying to build with someone, connect with someone, may setting of expectations naman kayo at the start. But at the same time, meron ding open doors na clear doon sa side ng client na hindi, dapat honest din si client sa sarili niya na if may mga nangyayari na sa session sa feeling mo nga it's not working out for you, then dapat hindi mahirap sa client magsabi ng pwede ba akong maglipat. Kasi I think yun naman yung challenge din doon, isa parang hindi niya na nakikita yung working synergy, yung therapy. Minsan ang hirap for the client kasi lalo na yung mga client natakot mag-no o mag-end ng things. Kasi hirap silang umalis doon sa therapist na hindi na nag-work for them. So kailangan ikaw sa therapist, ma-open mo yung doors that they could leave if sa tingin lang that would be more helpful. And dapat be accommodated.
Thank you, sir. Isa rin pwede kong i-share na ako, personal experience ko na somewhat effective, hindi ko sasabi sa lahat ng cases, pero kasi most of my naging clients ko ay may mga themes sila eh, parang in the verge of giving up, ganyan, or does not want to change. Pero they are there. So may ganong contradiction. So, laging effective kapag sinasabi ko sa kanilang, you know what, I'm not giving up on you. And even if you stay here, I will be with you here. Pero I'm telling you, if we just stay here, we're not going anywhere. And if you decide, should you decide to take a step, I will be with you. So parang may combination siya na, sige, kung ayaw mo muna magbago, I will be with you. We can still to stay here in this comfortable space. No? I won't judge you, pero I'm telling you the truth, walang mangyayari kung ganito lang. And kung kailan ka man mag-decide mag-change, nandun pa rin ako with you. So, yung ganon, for me, kinda, nalalasan yung pressure on their end, di ba? Kasi parang may pressure na laging it works both ways. So, dapat mag-work, the client has to work on it as well. Pero kasi may mga cases na mahirap sa kanila, no? To change, to actually take a step. So, we need to understand that as well. And then reality check what it means to just stay and not do anything. And just remind them that you will be with them. No matter how long that would be, no? Yeah. So, I don't know if that also resonates with you. Pero yeah, they stick. They come back. Di ba, mas dalas yung pressure, tapos mas naging open to, say, yeah, let's try little steps toward change.
Hi sir, I just wanted to ask, galing po sa FB Live, so I'm sorry if I didn't catch anything earlier, pero I just wanted to ask if like, does the general public know about these processes na you guys really do take the time and you take care to match clients with therapists? Kasi, and like, if not, how can we make this more known to the general public? Because and also in line with this, do you think that making people know that this processes exist will encourage people to avail of psychological services? Especially, I at least for me personally, I would hesitate if I didn't know that this existed. Kasi parang, ayun nga, parang random yung mapupunta sa akin, ano, sino to? Ayun, so, that's my question.
Yeah. Different kasi talaga yung practices sa mga clinics mo and centers, how they do it, how they assign clients to therapists. Some would do the matching to certain factors. Some would not, may random assignment. Yung iba based on sex. Pero, I think, yeah, so siguro I want to encourage na to ask, to allow opportunities for clients to actually give their preferences, to provide what they to provide their preferences in terms of therapist, therapy style, gender, anything else that matters to them, which is yung ginagawa ng psych-serve. No? Yeah. So how can this be known to the public? So pakishare ang ating FB Live. And now, to parang you're encouraging na you have the right to actually request for certain characteristics of your therapist. Kung wala man sila, at least you have, at least naibigay mo yung preference mo. Yeah. And yun nga, hindi naman natatapos yun sa pre-treatment matching. So kung walang similarities pre-treatment, we can bank on complementarities. And that is a dynamic process. Marami pa rin, so hindi impossible to still form an alliance and facilitate outcomes kahit wala kayong similarities at the onset. Kasi wala naman tayong magagawa. But for complementarities, pwede. Yeah. Mas madali lang, sinasabi sa research, mas madali lang to help clients be more comfortable in the therapy kapag meron ng established similarities, shared experiences. Yeah, but it's not impossible naman din. So, yeah. Pero, yeah, for me, hindi ko masyadong i-emphasize dito yung so it's just an implication yung matching. Mas gusto ko i-emphasize yung what are you gonna do once you have a client. Recognize similarities pa rin and differences. And how do we navigate those similarities and differences? Yun yung feeling ko better na tingnan. Kasi, kasi I'm coming from, ang nakikita ko lagi is puro strategies, no? So problem, let's identify, share me what your experiences are, based on research evidences, ito yung appropriate treatment, or based on my therapy orientation, ito yung we can work on this. Pero the relational dynamics ay hindi masyadong binibigyan ng pansin. No? So yeah. Kaya I'm more of an advocate of relational approaches regardless of therapy orientations. Kasi possible yan, regardless of your therapy orientations. Meron naman mga therapy orientations that would have be more explicit about alliance. Pero kahit yung iba na hindi ganun ka-explicit, you can make it explicit. Even if very highly structured or highly manualized yung protocol or whatever treatment approach. Yeah.
Hi, just a question, since napag-usapan so far right now ay more on the like side ng client, right? Like how would they know? I guess yung naging question namin is like on the flip side as a therapist, like how would you know, I guess yung limits or yung boundaries nung fit mo with the client, or if it even exists? As in like do you treat it as like keep trying and expanding your own professional boundaries, or like is there a point where you na parang okay, this really is not going to work between you and me, and that's something that you also I feel like it's something that should be communicated to the client, but like how do you know when you get to that point, or is there an objective gauge or line, or is that really just a professional boundary that you set for yourself as well?
I'd like to see it as a profession, you asserting your limits, knowing your own limits, and making it explicit to your clients. Ako in supervision, maraming ganyan, no? Parang gusto ko na lang siyang i-refer. Tapos ang response ko siya, complimentary. Na-exhaust na ba talaga? Lahat ang dapat i-exhaust. So mapapa-rethink siya. Or yung iba ko, effective use, sabi ko na, kung dati mag-isa ka lang working on that client, ngayon, I'm with you. I will be supervising you regularly. Kasi minsan sayang, lalo kung tagal na nilang yung relationship. So may na-establish na-invest na yung client din doon, tapos i-refer mo siya. I'm not saying that it will lead to damage or, diba? Pero may potential consequence yun. Na panibagong investment naman to a different therapist. So, nasasayangan ako with that. Minsan encourage ko lang sila to stay with the client and reminding them that they're not, at this time, di na sila mag-isa. Para may iba na silang perspectives, may supervision na. So, pwedeng ganon. Although, I have nothing against, pero pinipilit. Okay, I have nothing against therapists na nagde-decide talaga to, I think it's time, to terminate, to refer out. That is acknowledgement of their limitations sa kanila mismo. That's their, based on their assessment, hindi na talaga nakakatulong yung pagpapatuloy ng therapy. So, if nagawa, kung ganun naman din, okay lang, hindi ko naman din ipipilit. Pero kasi the fact na napilit kita, a part of you still wants to stay. And I wanna encourage that more. So kung talagang alam mong, diba, hindi ka na mapipilit, parang ganon, to stay. Alam mo yon, ikaw yon, ikaw lang makakala. Kahit supervisor mo, hindi ka na mapipilit. So, so wala objective line or criteria, but pwede mong basis is it leads to burnout when comparing your well-being with other clients, when relating with other clients, pero it's a particular client na to, you're really exhausted, now compromise yung well-being mo. Baka that's a line that you can draw. Yun din, di ko yung pinipilit. Kapag it leads to compromising the health and safety of the therapist. Ano ba indicator ng okay. Baka additional information pwede mo makuha. Talk about it with your client. Uy, ilang 20 sessions na tayo, 30 sessions, dapat 3 years na tayo. What do you think? How is your experience so far? And you can be honest because this is what I observe, this is what I have, for me, ito yung nakikita ko. Tapos, invite feedback. Baka may information ako makuha doon, baka na-feel na rin pala nyo yun. Yun nga, opening that dialogue, inviting them to also be honest about what they feel about the therapy. Kung congruent kayo doon. Kasi, anong decision mo kung gusto pa ni client mag-stay tapos ayaw mo na? Ay, sorry.
So may questions lang tayo from Facebook. So ipagsasama ko na yung dalawa. So yung una, parang what if daw your client sees you as very congruent and yun yung dahilan kung bakit siya nagsistay sa'yo. So tapos ikaw din naman as the therapist daw, nakikita mo na yung sessions ninyo has the highest possibility daw na magkaroon ng good outcomes dun sa mental health. Kaso sa ibang aspeto daw, baka daw hindi na siya makatulong kasi pwedeng hindi niya na-address maybe yung problems or maybe parang dahil nga doon sa similarities ay magkaroon pa ng chance na mas lumala yung mental health ng client. Dapat bang magstay with the dapat bang magstay daw with the client? Tapos yung isa pang question, siguro in relation na lang din doon. So kung kailangan nga hiwalay dun sa client, how do you break up with the client?
So, doon sa unang question, parang I need more info on that. So, congruent kayo sa pagtingin nyo sa inyong alliance? Kaninong assumption na hindi na siya nag-work? Okay, so objectively, pag measure yung symptoms or ina-assess yung well-being or what, hindi okay. Well, yeah, what do we prioritize? Do we prioritize the relationship or their well-being? See, even if at the relation, diba, your alliance is okay. By the way, these are just measures of alliance na pwedeng may bias doon sa assessment of the alliance. So, yeah. If it's compromising, the congruence is, parang ganun yung tanong, no? The congruity is compromising the health, the well-being of, and then, yeah, we prioritize it. We prioritize that over the alliance, no matter how congruent that is. Pero, yeah, have that conversation with your client. Medyo mahirap din yun kasi yun yung kapag nag-worsen na may mga situations kasi hindi nag-worsen pero nagsistay lang. May symptoms pa rin siya. Pero hindi nag-worsen. Pero you are able to resolve certain other problems and then mataas yung alliance. For me, okay na rin yun, no? Kasi possible naman yun na tapos bumabalik siya sa'yo sa therapy. So, there must be something that your client is gaining from it. If it's not symptom reduction, there's something else. That's why they're coming back. Yeah. Pero the moment na nagkaroon ng decline talaga, nakita mo, na-observe mo rin, nire-report na ni client, then the alliance ratings will not matter na for me. Diba? Pero it doesn't lead agad to termination. Pwede kasi that's an information for you to make adjustments. What are we doing ba? Okay, so hindi ko pa na-publish actually na-publish ko last year yung may conceptualization of alliance na ambiguity and clarity, superficiality and depth, tsaka ease and struggle. Ibig sabihin, even if nag-agree kayo sa goals, pero kung superficial goals yun, diba? You're not hitting core problems. It might not be a good relationship kasi sayang. Or ganun din, no? Ambiguous yung relationship. Ang tingin sa'yo ng client is friend na. Hindi na siya therapy. We still have to assert that professional boundaries. So, yeah. And then the second question, how do we terminate? How do you guys terminate? Binalik sa'yo. Iba-iba rin yung practice doon. So merong, others would have a dedicated termination session. Diba? They would invite the client for a termination session to talk about what transpired, what happened, evaluate yung naging relationship, yung processes. May mga times talaga, hindi naman, and we respect then if the client does not come back, does not respond to that invite. Right nila yun, na hindi na bumalik, na i-terminate nila prematurely. Okay? So, pero, yeah, yung question is, termination ba initiated by, kasi pwedeng initiated by the therapist, and initiated by the client. So maraming klase nun, pwedeng nag-terminate tayo kasi okay ka na. And just sign up again or come back kapag magkaroon ka ulit ng issues. Pwedeng ganon. Pwede naman ito-terminate kasi hindi na nag-work or nag-worsen yung condition. So how to do that? Yeah, have that conversation pa rin na minsan pine-prepare yung client na papunta na sila sa termination. Ano ba? Pero may iba kasing practices, di ko alam kung sa private practice, open-ended. Alam niyo yun, walang official termination. Parang, kung hindi siya bumalik, hindi siya babalik. Pero open ako, open doors pa rin kung gusto niyang mag-sign up or therapy ulit with me. So walang official termination. I think sa mga organizations, clinics, mayroong ganong kasi babaguhin mo, panibagong informed consent yun, panibagong process. So mayroong termination, official termination session talaga. Diba? Tama ba? No? And then feedback, evaluation, therapy evaluation form. Yun din, kung hindi naman na sila nagpakita, pwedeng magpasagot ka na lang for, yeah. Sorry, di ko alam kung nasagot ko yung tanong, how to. Nasagot ko ba yung tanong, how to terminate? You can have a dedicated termination session, pero it's still the client's right whether they would attend that session or, di ba, come back. Yeah. Unless may iba bang thoughts on, yeah.
We have a bit of time for one last question.
Curious lang din, based sa experience mo sa research and supervision, ano yung ideal training para sa mga developing, so sa mga beginning clinicians pa lang, kumbaga nagsisimula pa lang ng graduate training, for example, and yung mga season na, yung matagal na sa training, in terms of how to, matagal sa practice, in terms of how to incorporate yung mga key ideas na nakuha mo from research and even sa supervision work mo din regarding yung impact ng congruity and complementarity sa pag-enhance pa ng clinical skill and building pa ng therapeutic relationship.
So in early career or beginning clinicians, parang I would really encourage them first, although mahirap yun, to focus more on building their identity as a clinician. Ano bang philosophical, theoretical orientation mo? Kasi magmamatter yun moving forward. Hindi ka dapat hodgepodge lang of, hindi ka dapat technician, therapist ka. Yung identity as a therapist is very important na yun muna yung, so sarili, bago yung relationship, yung alliance siguro. Kasi I think kung establish yung identity, mas ready ka to shift gear, to do the complementary work, to recognize similarities and disparities. Diba? You know what your limitations are, you know what you're comfortable with, what kinds of cases, populations you want to work with, you know your therapy orientation. I think it should start from there. Now, kung sa mga, kung na-establish na yon, then ako I would encourage mga alliance-focused, mga kasi established na yung orientation mo. So, mas relational, in-depth approaches to dealing with your clients. For me, that's my encouragement. No? So okay lang if hindi tayo maging flexible with dapat alam natin lahat. No? Pero I argue, and yun yung masasabi, this is a common factors model. Sabihin, alliance is common to all therapy orientations. So kaya to utilize this explicitly, deliberately in your sessions, no matter your orientations are. But it should start from there. Clarifying your orientations and identity as a clinician. Yeah.
Okay, so to award the certificate to Dr. Bobby Rilvera, we'd like to ask Dr. Jose Antonio Clemente to come up front, our Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs, to kindly read the citation and award the certificate to Bobby.
Siguro po muna, before we award this to Dr. Rilvera, baka pwede palakpakan din po natin lahat ng mga tao na tumulong mga colleagues sa department. Ito po, sina Paul Labor, sina Julian Paterno, si Ella Ignacio. Meron pa po ba tayo dito that we should also say thank you? And PsychServe, thank you so much sa PsychServe, syempre. para sa maraming bagay pati. And also sa lahat ng mga sumali sa atin sa Facebook, thank you so much for joining us. So, we'd like to... So, itong sertipiko ng... Ay, sorry po. Camera 1. Nandun po nasa camera 1 tayo. Ito pong ating sertipiko ng pagpapahalaga ay malugod na ginagawad kay Dr. John Robert Rilvera para sa kanyang natatanging pagbabahagi ng kanyang kaalaman para sa therapeutic synergy, investigating the role of client-therapist congruity and complementarity on alliance and outcomes, na pinagkaloob ngayon ika-19 ng Mayo 2025 sa Lagmay Hall. Pinirmahan ng ating tagapangulo. You couldn't be here, nasa meeting pa si kawaksing Professor J.A. Yakat. But Bobby, maraming salamat. That was wonderful. I'm sorry. Clear na iPad ko. So for photo purposes, sa camera 2. Okay. Si Bobby na lang po. Congrats, Bobby. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you so much po.
We'd like to ask everybody to come up to the front and take a photo.
Sige, so lahat po tayo punta po dito sa harap. Magkakaroon ng...
Please come up in front.
Siyempre, sayang naman yung Pilipino.
Pakuloy ka lang.
Okay, akala ko nag-shift ka na. New hair color.
So, baka kailangan po nating mag-compress ng konti. Lapit pa po di... Tracy, kita ba? Okay. So, wall-to-wall daw po yung kita. Ayan, meron po tayong empty space. Dito pwede po sumingit. Okay. Meron po tayong munting merienda, so pwede pong kumuha ng merienda. At sa mga hindi pa po nagsa-sign up, kung maaari lang po sana ay mag-sign up para po sa liquidation.
Pasend sa akin para
Kailangan po
ma-file.
namin at suporta.
Yung file name na SFP20.
Thank you very much again for attending our AMA talk for today. Please watch the department's Facebook page to be appraised of further and upcoming talks for this coming year. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy Monday.